I'll start with the first most important part is I'm not sure exactly what I'm gonna say. But I will also, okay, I'll take a live. I got you. I am, you're talking about the Masters. I'm actually leaving here to get on the road to drive down. So I will be able to.
What time you leaving? Can I go with you?
I'm leaving directly from here. I'll be on my way on the road, and hopefully down there. I'm trying to get there. I've got to stop in Atlanta and pick up a golf buddy of mine who's going with me, and then we'll head over from there. I guess first thing I'll do is give you a little idea about. Most people ask about the stadium, what's going on with that. So right now, I am happy to report that we are still on time and on budget. We have, from a progress standpoint, all of the concrete is basically done, and that's the, it's the sort of lower half of the entire thing, which is already at the height of the current stadium. We're now starting to put on the steel for the superstructure for the roof. That will make it twice as high as the current stadium. But we think if the current progress holds up, it will look, by the end of this season, it will look like it's done. And it'll be basically all interior work from there. So we're going on, we're on schedule to open, turn the keys over in February of 27. And we will hit the ground running once we do. Other things I think are somewhat relevant. We have, from the start of this project, we've tried to make sure that it included Tennessee, Nashville firms. So at last count that I looked, we had 120 Tennessee-based firms working on the project. And that's out of about 275, something like that. So we've been coming in a really good clip of being able to involve and have local businesses participate. On the workforce side, we have probably 800 on average per day workers on site. That number will get as high as 1,800 once we get inside, and then the things that work on the inside more. So from a jobs perspective and trying to involve workforce and local workforce and people in the area, we've been doing workforce training. So we've had several classes of folks who have used this project as an opportunity to sort of recalibrate and learn construction and try to get involved. That's been pretty successful as well. The thing I want to talk about that everybody wants to talk about is the draft that we're taking. But rest assured, we have our guys on the football end have been grinding tape, as we say, for probably since January. I can tell you they literally watch tape, start at 7:30, take a break for lunch, go to 7:30. That has been what they've done every day since January, unless they're going to actually see a pro day or watch one of the players come in. So they're ready, they're good to go. I think the philosophy that they have shown is clear, and it's really going to help us because they're committed to the idea of we have to develop, grow, and retain our own talent. We're not trying to go out. If you've noticed this free agency period, we didn't have a lot of splashy stuff. The purpose of the free agency was to get pieces we needed at value to allow us to do what we need to do on the draft side. You want to develop your own players, you want to pick your own players, and so they're committed to that. And I think that's going to serve us well in the long term to become a consistently competitive team, which is what you want. You want to be one of those teams that every year you're a good team, and then you may have a chance to be a great team, but you want to build that base to be a good team for as long as you possibly can. So that's my sort of football related spiel, but I thought I would talk just a little bit and follow up on some things Patrick was talking about, just sort of how I ended up sort of meandering through life because a lot of people tend to ask about it. So, as he said, it started out, with the Father Ryan. Went off to Harvard. When I went, I'd never visited Boston, never seen the college. When I had to go, my father was a judge and he had a case. My mother was a professor, she had to teach. So I got on a plane by myself, a bunch of bags, got off promptly tried to get to the dorm room, and a cab was kind enough to drive me around Watertown and the entirety of the Boston area. And what should have been about a $10 cab ride, he charged me $45. So that was a welcome to Cambridge. But very, very useful. Learned a lot from that experience. And in any event, so I came back to go to law school here at Vandy. Everything in my sort of front view was designed to try to be mayor of Nashville. That was what I wanted to do. And so I went to law school for politics, for government. I really, that was the direction. At some point, my dad said, well, you may actually want to learn how to practice law at some point. Get a degree. So I said, okay, I'll go, and I went to a big firm in Houston to practice for some years. Went to a labor boutique after that. And then all of a sudden, the Oilers, that's when they decided that they were going to try to come down to Nashville. And so I had actually worked by chance on some of the stadium issues in Houston.
Astronaut.
Yes, when trying to figure out, they were having a problem with the city and the county on the Astrodome and the lease and all of that. And I had done some of the stuff tangentially related to that. And then since I had gone to Vandy, and I happened to kind of know, the guys like Stokes and Bartholomew and Clarkner, and they were the ones that were trying to help kind of get the deal done down here. So I raised my hand and said, hey, can I be part of a transition team or something, since I kind of know a little bit about both, and I know both places, and that went absolutely nowhere. But somehow my name got in the hat, and the league office in New York called, and they said, hey, we've got this job in New York, would you be interested? And I was like, well, tell me what it is. And they started saying, well, have you ever done antitrust work? Have you ever done this type of work? Have you ever done this? And everything they named, one, I had no idea that there was anybody, that there was a job that did that, because everything I did was really just a function of the clients that we had. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a focused thing. It was just, this is what we had. It was arbitration work. I did workers' comp for the city of Houston. It was just, those were the things that were coming across my plate. But as they kept saying everything, at some point I was like, who else can you get for this job? I can't imagine anybody having done all this stuff. So, that got me intrigued. I didn't like New York. I'd worked there previously a little bit. But I knew, I was like, I think I'm gonna like this job. So, if you got that choice, I was like, let's go ahead and see what we can do. And so I went up there. That was in '97. And so at the league, I kind of was able to sort of just grab things, so to speak. If an issue came up that people didn't want to kind of deal with, I tended to be the person who was like, I'll take it. And so that ended up leading to me running things that happened to be the sort of hot button things that the league was dealing with, like player conduct and steroids and gambling and all the sort of integrity of the game sorts of things, along with labor generally, dealing with the union. I I was part of the negotiating team that would try to create new CBAs and deal with the union on that front. And so I did that for a while, and ultimately found a way to get back onto the sort of political end, because I ran our DC office government affairs function for a while. I ran the player engagement function, which is all of the off-field things, continuing education, wellness, financial ed, rookie orientation, and all those sorts of things. So we got a kind of a broad view of some of the things that were possible in sports. And then in 20, we negotiated a new CBA that was ratified on March 5th of 20, and then on March 13th, the world changed with COVID, and I started I'm probably was one of the few people. I was working in the office, every day, and probably into April. We were back, and I was in New York, and that was unheard of. But what we were all trying to do, there were, there's only maybe a 10th of us actually working, but we were trying to create all of the protocols that would allow the teams and allow the league to play that season. So we had to figure out how can we logistically get all of that done to, have rules in place, make sure we're not, spreading, make sure our players are safe, make sure we're testing, so we're going out and doing deals to get labs to set up trailers at every single club. It was a massive effort. Worked on that. In the middle of it, I get a call from Tennessee, and it's finally, like, I knew I would never leave the NFL unless I thought the job would be as interesting and as enjoyable as the NFL. And through a confluence of events, it ended up that Tennessee and I were able to work it out in July of 20, so I came down here. And then, of course, the first thing, and probably all the rest of that 2020, I spent trying to implement all of the rules at the club. And so, I felt like I walked in the door with at least something that I probably knew a little bit more about than most folks, which was kind of helpful. But overall, look, it's been great to be back in Nashville. I always kept a hand in it. I'm involved with Vanderbilt a lot, and in between that and the Titans, and my father was down here, and family and that kind of thing. I'd always kept a hand, but being back down here and sort of seeing things, seeing the draft when it was down here from the NFL side, since I was still at the league at the time, but seeing how the league responded and understood the value that Nashville brought, and that draft remains the most interesting, best, unusual, never to be repeated again, no matter what you hear about these other cities when they say, oh, they might have had a couple more people come. One, don't think that's true, but certainly there has never been an event like that. And that has propelled a lot of what you're seeing now, and interest from other events, other conferences, and then certainly when we complete this stadium, it's full steam ahead, and trying to work with the city, work with the state, to try to get as many of these major events that allow Nashville the opportunity to show why it is what it is. And it really is, like, if you've been to events, sort of large events in other cities, I've been to now, I guess, 29 Super Bowls in a row. Missed the only one the one during COVID when they wouldn't let anybody go. So it broke my streak and a lot of others, but been to every one since '97 beyond that. And we know functionally that the way Nashville sets up and the way that it is trained, one, to work together collaboratively from a business, political stakeholder end, and then the way that people are genuinely interested in putting the city's best foot forward, you know, and that's from the person who's pulling tickets to, you know, to the city leaders. Everybody understands that that's sort of Nashville's special sauce, and that you're just not going to get that anywhere. We were in Vegas; they certainly do a lot of hospitality. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's a great place, great Super Bowl, loved it, but it will be nothing like one in Nashville or, you know, a lot of the other large events that we're trying to get. So that's about all I had. Yes.
What has been your biggest surprise in working with the NFL, both at the league and at a team?
I think the thing I usually would say is that people have this idea that the NFL is a behemoth. And it really isn't that big, you know, but its impact is that big. That I will give you, but you realize that, you know, we're not Costco, we're not Walmart. Like, we don't have tens and hundreds of millions of workers, and, you know, it's not that type of thing. It's relatively small. The league office, we probably have 1,200, 1,400 people, and that includes, you know, NFL.com, the network, NFL Films, all of those sorts of things. It's not that big. And that the teams, look, we have a couple hundred employees, you know, and so I think understanding that dynamic between we're not big, but we are big in impact, that was really surprising to me, because I don't know what I thought, but I was surprised pretty early on at that. I tell people, you know, the NFL is like a luxury liner. You know, it moves slow, it takes a while to turn, it'll run over anything in its path if that's the case. The teams are more like speedboats, you know, or, you know, nicer than that, I guess, but they're fast, decisions have to come fast, you don't always have the, you know, luxury of time to make all your decisions. You have to be, you know, swift about it, and you turn on a dime, and if you mess around, you'll get thrown out, and, you know, team will be on its way. So I think that to me it's that, and then I guess I would probably also add that it really is nothing like the NFL in terms of people think they have, you feel a sense of ownership, right? And you think about any other company, you don't think like that, right? You don't think about Target, and you don't want to call into a radio show and say, I can't believe Target raised the price of, you know, eggs today. You don't think like that. You don't, even though you're a consumer, which the people, you know, our fans are consumers, they're coming to enjoy our product, they feel a sense of ownership. And that ownership is something that I think drives the league, drives its popularity. You know, I remember at one point I was dealing with, I don't know if you guys know, but like I was dealing with the Ray Rice matter, and you know, I suspended him, and people were accusing us of all kind of things that we knew information. It was craziness, but that's what happens when people just think they have an opinion. So I was dealing with all of that, and really it was at a point I'm looking at at one point an announcer had had on his screen, on the screen behind him on the studio, he had a big picture, and it was me, the commissioner, and Jeff Pash, who's the league counsel. And underneath it had resign, exclamation point. And so things were pretty, they were pretty, it was a lot going through that period. And so at some point, my aunt, who actually introduced me to football, because we would go, she was a big Oiler fan, and she lived in Houston, I would go, watch the Oiler games with her. So she calls me, and, I'm thinking she's gonna be saying, well, hey, hang in there, I see a lot's going on, you'll be all right, I know you guys are right, it's okay, you make it. But instead, she proceeds to, and she's probably 75 at the time, something like that. She proceeds to holler at me for 45 minutes about why the Houston Texans, her new team, after they left, were running more 4-3 than 3-4 defense. She's like, I don't get it. They don't have the personnel. They don't line up right. It just doesn't make any sense. And they're not taking advantage of the corners. And so I say all that to say, when she did that, that was very helpful to me, because it reminded me, like, even when this is just a job and it's a job people think of it as more. And that, from an NFL standpoint, that's you can't recreate that elsewhere. You have to watch football with someone. People watch baseball games on television all the time by themselves. People watch a lot of stuff, but football's kind of, you have to have somebody there to watch it. Yes, sir.
So let's pretend 2027 rolls around, it opens up, we got a winning season. Would you consider running for mayor then?
No. Oh boy. Okay, that's gonna be one of those types of questions. No.
Well, you always hear the labor union and the NFL that's so acrimonious, it's so. I mean, what's that in reality? The relationship between
it's not acrimonious. I think it is. There's a fair degree of posturing. Particularly, I think the union is compelled to kind of press things. Like, as an example, they just they do this annual survey of the players where they rate every team in terms of how good is your dining, how good is your locker room, how good is your medical staff, and it's the most non-scientific. It is terrible. We know it, and even if you accept the premise and you still really go through and kind of look at, okay, what does this response mean? Why does this result in a ranking of 1 at this club and this result in a ranking of 18 at this club? Even with all of that, they know what they're doing. They're trying to push every club to feel like there's something they got to do better, because they will see, people, fans, and other things. Where it's like, why isn't our club, why isn't our team doing the best for their players on travel? They'll do things like that. We really have been able to have long-term CBAs. The last two have been 10 years, and those, that labor piece in that sense is one of the key things to why the NFL is sort of clipping so much higher than everybody else, because it settles down sponsors, it settles down media, so that they know they can lock in and pay the exorbitant prices that they're paying, because they know they don't have work stoppages and things like that to be in the way. They know we are able to do things like flex game schedules and all of those things that ultimately benefit the fan and consumer. A lot of those things you have to have union agreement and participation to do. So at the end of the day, we get all of that done. So I think you know, I never characterize the relationship as sort of anything other than what you would expect and a difference between union and management. So, yes.
Couple of quick questions. The first one is a league question. Having worked in New York and now with the Titans, what problems would keep you up from the league perspective, aside from the helmet issue, those type of issues? Is not as well known, but you know more about it because of your background. The second thing is, were ticket renewals, how are they coming with the older folk, the younger folk?
On to your second point, we are doing extremely well. We have on PSL and ticket sales, premium, that kind of thing, we're probably at least 14 months ahead of where we thought we would be in terms of where we've already opened the last phase, right? We had set it up in 3 phases, already into the last phase. So the demand has been tremendous. The wait list is growing by the day, and we are highly confident that we'll have that building sold out, and it will be rocking. Demographically, you know, there are a lot of things we've been doing that will kind of help us reach a broader demo. So if you may have seen, for example, we have a section that we call the mosh pit, which is reserved for the most ardent fans who will be, you know, dressed up, painted up, basically bleachers, but you know, the thought is more than likely younger, right? Because they're going to be ones, they're going to be standing the whole game and all of that, but we created that type of, you know, entry point and option point for them to help us sort of expand and include, you know, other younger groups in particular to go along with the families that are, you know, already sort of buying where they were buying before, whether that's a lower bowls tickets or wherever they would be. So you know, there are a lot of things we're trying to do to help us bridge and reach every, you know, potential customer and consumer we can, and so that would be one of them. Things that keep me up at night are, I mean, when at the league, there's a phrase of what my job was, which I won't repeat, but people tended to call me that, the chief of hard stuff. That was my so. But it was at 30 at the league level, you have 32 potential of everything. So if you think about player incidents, there's always something. Some player is going to get into some type of trouble, or some club is going to get into some type of trouble, or we've got big things like all of a sudden, you know, after we argued against it for, you know, 20 years, all of a sudden sports betting becomes legal, and we have to figure out, okay, this is the new world. How do we deal with this new world, but also maintain the integrity of our game first and foremost, and then but understand how we maneuver in this sort of new world and trying to deal with that. You know, one year it might be, you know, the one thing when I say that about the NFL and its sort of impact, outsized impact, every issue becomes an NFL issue if it happens in the NFL, right? So a player gets a DUI, all of a sudden DUIs are the problem, and you know, it's us, like it's just a guy like anybody else. I always used to tell people, it's like, look, if you're sort of that concerned about it with us, why don't you go down and follow that guy to the courthouse when he goes to deal with his, and guess what you will see? a whole bunch of other people in there having the same issue, and nobody's telling them, you've gotta, this player's gotta be cut from your team, or, and I get that in some instances we are different and we have to do things differently, but I always try to get people to understand you're asking us to be different. And a lot of times there's not necessarily a rationale for it other than, well, they're role models. Like, okay, so is the teacher at the school. So is the, everybody, that, it's because we're bigger, I don't know. But there always are things that you look for. When we were dealing with the CBA, it was, we gotta get a deal done. Because, to have the potential of a work stoppage is not good for anybody. And so that was like a three-year angst as we were trying to negotiate the new deal, to get that done and make sure. So, it's any number of things.
But it seems like the teams are reacting to things, because I know that certain teams, not necessarily the Titans, I think the Titans though, have an allowance for each player for Uber money if they're going downtown or doing something they shouldn't be doing. That money is targeted for those types.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, we do, certainly. Like I said, I try to show people that, I mentioned Target earlier. If when someone goes to Target, goes to work for Target, they're not given financial education courses. They're not given sex education classes. They're not, all of these things that we do. I just would like people generally to understand, like, you understand that that's, that's probably not normal. Most workplaces don't do that. But we do it. And I think, there are a lot of things that we do on the preventative end. I ran that function for a while, and it is helpful. There are plenty of players who say, what are you doing? I don't need this from you. I'm a grown man. I know what I know how to make choices in life. But there are others who it does benefit them. And so a lot of that kind of thing is actually, I'll give you even different examples. With things like the players' benefits. Like the union sometimes works with us and says, you know what, we're gonna make this benefit available, but players can't access it until 5 years after they finish playing, or things like that, right? And that's great, but it also, that has a cost. If you're Peyton Manning, you're like, what are you, give me my money. I know how to invest it.